Hi guys, and welcome to another digital painting tutorial. Welcome to my channel, Creatively Me with Bree. And yes, you guessed it, I'm Bree. Someone saw this watercolor piece that I made last year and asked if I would be able to make that background or something similar in Procreate. I think I achieved it. We shall see. So here's the piece that I'm referencing. And now we're going to get started with making this digitally. Be sure to pause here so that you can see the canvas size and settings. So first we want to grab our brush. It's under Artistic, and it is the old beach brush. Then we're going to select a medium, light medium gray. You can of course have clean edges if you want clean edges like you would see with watercolor paper that's been taped around the edges. I wanted the edges to be a lot more loose because I just felt like in my head, I had a certain style that I was going for with the overall piece, and this just seemed like the best option. Side note, I have not lifted the brush once. I'm literally keeping it pressed down the entire time. Once I have the whole surface covered, even if it's uneven, I duplicate the layer. In my case, it's 5 times just to be safe that it is consistently covered. And then I combine those layers together by pinching all those layers together as one. Then on that layer, I select Alpha Lock, and I'm going to choose a near white color, and then I'm going to go in to Industrial, I think. Yeah. And then I'm going to select Rusted Decay. I'm doing this because I like the texture that it gives. It reminds me of watercolor, which is, well, what we're doing. So on a new layer, I'm going to select a blue that I feel somewhat matches what I did on the watercolor piece and go back to that old beach brush. And I'm not going to get too hung up about where I'm placing everything. I'm just trying to sort of get the general shape down. And then I'm going to just add a slightly varied color because watercolor seldomly is one solid color without change. And then I'm using the smudge tool now, and the smudge tool brush that I'm using is also the old beach brush. I like that it sort of maintains some of the squarish shape, and it blends nicely. It also helps create the harsh edges that we saw in the original watercolor. With the exception of one time, I use different layers for each color. And that is so that way if I need to adjust or change anything, I can. The more layers, the better. So I'm just combining these, smudging them together. I like to say blending, but it is technically the smudge tool. All right, I'm going into layers in a moment here. I'm going to go to the main layer that we have with the auto lock on, and we are going to just brighten it up a bit. I still want the texture to come through, but I don't want it to appear like the piece is gray underneath. But it's obviously easier to see gray in that texture on that white, so I do have to keep some of the gray in there. And I just noticed some things that I had missed in blending, and I fixed it. And then now on a new layer, clipping mask, I'm going to do a dark purple. And then a similar purple, and then a more vibrant purple, which is too vibrant, I might add. There we go, that's better. So, as before, grabbing that smudge tool, it is the old beach brush, and I'm just blending the color out. Observing my watercolor piece again, I realized there's a little bit more purple down here at the bottom, just not as dark. So I just make sure that I tap in some, light, medium light color. And then there's also a blue. I should have done this one on a different layer, but I did not. So do as I say, not as I do. Put that on another layer. You can, of course, use different colors, different shapes, different composition. It's totally up to you. Typically, if there's something I'm trying to learn through a tutorial, I will go through the tutorial as it was intended, and then I go back and do my own version of it. So I think of the first time going through the tutorial as building muscle memory and trying to understand the concepts and get comfortable with how to implement them. And then I put into practice those things that I just learned afterwards. We're almost done with the painting part, which is pretty crazy, like these layers that we're building here. I did black here. I did take the opacity down, and that's because we're going to build up the black. I didn't want it to be too intense. And a lot of times with watercolor, it'll start intensely in one spot and sort of bleed out into sort of subtler tones. And that's what I wanted to have happen here. So on another layer, we're going to add black, and I will smudge it out a bit or blend it out, but still I'm not going to adjust the opacity, and I'm going to try and keep as much of the color as I can without having the black be too distracting from the other colors. I went back to the initial black layer where the opacity was taken down, and I painted this in, and then I'm going to go back in, go up to the layer where I didn't take down the opacity and paint in some black, and then, smudge it around. Now, I take navy blue, and I do put it on a new layer, and I brush it in on this side. And then, like the rest, I'm going to go back into my smudge tool after I take the opacity down, of course. And I'm just going to move it around. So I felt like there were a lot of harsh lines of like quote unquote dried paint. So I went into the pink because it's so dominating. I went to the smudge tool and I went down to water. And then I just tapped in a little just to smooth it out, because some parts of watercolor, right, blend really nicely and softly, and then you do get some that have blooming and just, more refined edges. So on a new layer, making sure that we've chosen the color black, we are then going to go into the brush spray paints and select flicks. And we're going to tap in said flicks of paint. When I have things where I would like them, I do go in with the eraser, the hard airbrush, and I just erase any areas that I feel are a little too concentrated or disrupt or take away from the focal point or what will be the focal point. And so I just tap out and erase, gently taking out anything that I just don't feel like adds to the piece. I do end up taking the selection tool and just grabbing this one little piece that just was sort of floating out there. I liked it. I just didn't want it out of the, and again, distracting the eye. On a new layer, under this particular layer that we were working on, we're going to select the splatter brush, and we're just going to put in a little bit of texture here and there. Yes, I'm still using black. And I'm just going to take it on down to overlay for the blending mode and take the opacity down. Now at the end of this piece, I will show you what it looks like if you use watercolor paper. However, in case you don't have watercolor paper, I wanted to show how you can continue to add in more texture to give the illusion of watercolor. On a new layer and selecting inside the inking brush set, Tinderbox, we are going to draw these cute little spiders. Now, you don't have to be exact, and it's also not very anatomical, but it's more playful and fun. Real spiders terrify me, cute illustrations don't, so this is what we went with. If you wanted to say have more texture in the spider and spider web part of this portion, you could always use one of the sketching brushes like 6B or Procreate pencil. I am drawing the spider on a different layer than the first spider that I drew. Technically, I should have 5 different layers before I combine them of spiders. However, I forget again, and there's one layer that has 2 spiders on it, and I have to move one. But don't worry, I show you how I do that. Okay, we're on our last spider, and this spider was the one that I left on the same layer as another spider. So in a moment you'll see as I go to try and change the size and move it, it ends up grabbing a lot of spider. See? And that's not what we want. So I go into the selection tool, make sure I'm on freeform, and that way I can grab just the one that I want. And now I combine those spideys. I add a new layer, and now I'm just going to do a thin line around the spiders. Just the body. That's not necessary, but it was a design choice that I went with. I was really enjoying using ink with my watercolors at the time. So, you know, any opportunity to use a few extra strokes of ink. And this is where the video gets tedious. Yes, more tedious than it's, already been. It's where we start painting the spider webs, and I do put a good majority of them on 2 times the speed. But if you are like just wanting to see the style but not wanting to put up with, sitting through such slowness, go ahead and adjust the speed of this video now to 2 times the speed. You're not missing much, I promise. It's really just me making these little lines, little swoops from one part of the web to the other part of the web. That's all that is. Now, each web is a little bit different in how I design them and how I go about them, because one is in a corner. Well, there's 2 in a corner. There's one that comes off the center of the page, which we're working on now. And there's another one that does come off the center of the page, but it's like half of an entire cobweb. So, whatever. You decide if it's worth your time or not. I respect it. All right, guys, we're about to be done here. So these are the pieces side by side. I am about to add watercolor to the digital example, so that way you can see, the difference and what it does for the piece. So it's watercolor paper that I did get with a watercolor brush set that I purchased online. I imported the image and put it on multiply, so now you can see that there's watercolor texture paper in the background there. Off, on, off, on, off, on. So I keep it on for this, and here is the finished product. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me and for this opportunity to share this with you. I hope that you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, share, and I'll see you guys real soon. Okay, bye.